Welcome to your free English lesson. This series will focus on phrases. This lesson will cover absolute phrases. It is important to write when you are asked to. It helps you to learn. You can use a whiteboard, but ideally a notebook would be best. That way, you can keep a record of your learning. There are 5 intended learning outcomes to achieve by the end of the lesson. 1. We are learning to recognise absolute phrases in sentences. 2. We are learning to explain that an absolute phrase is a modifier made up of a noun group and description. 3. We are learning to explain that an absolute phrase adds extra detail to a sentence. 4. We are learning to differentiate between absolute phrases and complete clauses. 5. We are learning to combine simple sentences with absolute phrases. An absolute phrase is a group of words that adds extra detail to a sentence, but it does not have a main verb. It usually includes a noun and description, often with a participle or adjective. Together, they act as a modifier. It does not form a complete sentence. Consider this example sentence. She walked through the crowd, her eyes fixed on the stage. The absolute phrase is her eyes fixed on the stage. Her eyes is the noun group. Fixed on the stage is the rest of the modifier. A modifier is a word or group of words that adds extra information to a sentence. In absolute phrases, the noun group and modifier act together as a modifier describing something or someone in the main clause. If an absolute phrase does not have a main verb, what is the role of the verb fixed? Fixed is a past participle, a non-finite verb form. It does not show tense. It does not function as the main verb. To turn this into a full clause, a finite verb would be required. Her eyes were fixed on the stage. She walked through the crowd and her eyes were fixed on the stage. The absolute phrase is basically a compressed version of the full clause. In this sentence, it removes and were, but keeps the meaning. No main verb means no finite or tensed verb, but it can have verb forms. Fixed in the absolute phrase is a verb form, but not a main verb. Writers use absolute phrases as a literary tool. They add extra detail without starting a new sentence. This extra detail can include atmosphere, description, and emotion. They create vivid images. They also show actions or conditions happening at the same time. Absolute phrases are common in stories and novels, descriptive writing, and formal or academic speech. In everyday speech, absolute phrases are used, but in a simpler, more natural way. They often appear when describing a situation quickly, adding extra information without a full sentence, speaking more casually or informally. Here are some examples. He looked around. No one else in the room. The children came home, their clothes covered in mud. She came in, her headphones on. Absolute phrases in everyday speech are often shorter, less formal, and sometimes sounds like extra comments at the end. An absolute phrase gives more information about the whole sentence. Remember, It includes a noun group plus the description, which does not have a main verb. And together, the absolute phrase acts as a modifier. Here are some examples using the present participle. The car sped away, its engine roaring loudly. She stood at the edge, her heart pounding rapidly. The storm approached, dark clouds gathering overhead. The river flowed gently, its waters glistening in the sun. Here are some examples using the past participle. He entered the room, his mind filled with doubt. The cake was served, its top decorated with strawberries. The letter arrived, its edges torn from travel. The project was complete, every detail checked twice. Here are some examples using adjectives as complements. He faced the crowd, his voice strong and steady. She walked away, her face pale and tired. The sky darkened, its colour deep and threatening. They waited in silence, their expressions tense and anxious. Here are some examples using prepositional phrases. She ran across the field, her backpack on her shoulders. He stood at the door, his keys in his hand. They sat together, their feet in the water. The artist worked quietly, her tools within reach. In some absolute phrases, like these prepositional phrases, there is no verb at all. Just the noun and the description is all that is needed for the meaning to be understood. Here are some examples using with phrases. We entered the room with our heads held high. They listened carefully, with their eyes fixed on the speaker. He walked away, with his shoulders slumped in defeat. She completed the test, with every answer checked twice. Using with in an absolute phrase is not to be confused with a prepositional phrase. With in a prepositional phrase shows how. It is not a separate noun and condition. An absolute phrase that uses with at the beginning describes a state alongside the main clause. It is also slightly more conversational rather than a writing style. Multiple absolute phrases can be used in one sentence. Here are some examples. The run across the finish line, his legs shaking, his chest heaving. She sat by the window, her eyes watching the rain, her mind drifting. A sentence can have more than two absolute phrases. It is grammatically correct. It isn't about correctness, it's about clarity and readability. They can be stacked. Consider the first example. The runner crossed the finish line, his legs trembling, his breath ragged, sweat dripping off his face. Stacking only becomes a problem when the phrases get too long or complex. There are too many to track and they interrupt the main idea. So a simple rule, 1 to 3 absolute phrases are smooth and effective. 4 or more are to be used with caution. Absolute phrases can sit at the beginning of a sentence. When they are positioned before a main clause, they set the scene, time, condition or atmosphere, add a meanwhile detail, and create a more literary or dramatic tone. Here are some examples. His arms folded. He waited for the meeting to end. The sun setting behind the hills. We headed home. Absolute phrases at the beginning of sentences must be followed by a comma. The phrase should clearly relate to the subject of the main clause. Absolute phrases can sit in the middle of a sentence. They are placed between commas, usually right after the subject or near the verb. They often add physical description, show emotional condition, and provide simultaneous action or state. Here are some examples. The teacher, her arms crossed, watched the class. The dog, its tail wagging, ran towards them. Commas must be used on both sides. If the absolute phrase is removed, the sentence still makes sense. The teacher watched the class. The dog ran towards them. Absolute phrases in the middle of a sentence add a quick descriptive interruption. Absolute phrases at the end of a sentence are very common. They feel like a finishing detail or a lingering image after the main action. They usually add a trailing image or detail, show simultaneous condition or result, and soften or extend the sentence rhythm. Here are some examples. She closed the door, her hands shaking. The leaves fell to the ground, the wind swirling around them. The main clause is first, followed by a comma. Then the absolute phrase comes next. Writers prefer the end placement because it is most natural and least disruptive. The extra detail doesn't interrupt the flow of the main idea. Multiple phrases can be stacked at the end of a sentence. Choose an absolute phrase that correctly completes the sentence. She left the house in a hurry. The clock ticking. Her coat half buttoned. The waves crashing. Remember, the absolute phrase must relate to the subject of the main clause. Here is an extender for anybody who would like a challenge. Write the absolute phrase as a complete phrase. Pause the video. The next slide contains the answer. Check your answer. She left the house in a hurry, her coat half buttoned. For the extender, the absolute phrase as a complete phrase sounds like this. She left the house in a hurry. Her coat was half buttoned. The storm finally passed, running through the field, the clouds drifting away slowly, the rain pouring down heavily, and the sun appeared again. Pause the video. The next slide contains the answer. Check your answer. The storm finally passed, the clouds drifting away slowly, and the sun appeared again. The answer for the extender is the storm finally passed, the clouds were drifting away slowly, and the sun appeared again. Their heads held high, the team walked off the field after their victory. The candles flickering, the team walked off the field after their victory. His phone vibrating, the team walked off the field after their victory. Pause the video. The next slide contains the answer. Check your answer. Their heads held high, the team walked off the field after their victory. The answer to the extender is their heads were held high as the team walked off the field after their victory. The car driving down the street. The house seemed quiet at night. The food cooking in the kitchen. The house seemed quiet at night. Its lights turned off. The house seemed quiet at night. Pause the video. The next slide contains the answer. Check your answer. Its lights turned off. The house seemed quiet at night. Here is the answer to the extender. Its lights were turned off. The house seemed quiet at night. The runner finished the race. Her arms raised. The door opening slowly. The computer buzzing. Pause the video. The next slide contains the answer. Check your answer. The runner finished the race. Her arms raised. Here is the answer to the extender. The runner finished the race. Her arms were raised. Smoke rising from the chimneys. The village looked peaceful in the morning. The alarm ringing in the room. The village looked peaceful in the morning. The children shouting in class. The village looked peaceful in the morning. Pause the video. The next slide contains the answer. Check your answer. Smoke rising from the chimneys. The village looked peaceful in the morning. Here is the answer to the extender. Smoke was rising from the chimneys. The village looked peaceful in the morning. The dog lay in the sun. The lesson starting. Enjoying the warm day. The dog lay in the sun, her hands shaking, enjoying the warm day. The dog lay in the sun, its eyes closed, enjoying the warm day. Pause the video. The next slide contains the answer. The dog lay in the sun, its eyes closed, enjoying the warm day. Here is the answer to the extender. The dog lay in the sun, its eyes were closed, while enjoying the warm day. The boy stood in the rain waiting for the bus, his clothes wet. The teacher writing on the board, the dog sleeping on the sofa. Pause the video. The next slide contains the answer. Check your answer. The boy stood in the rain waiting for the bus, his clothes wet. Here is the answer to the extender. The boy stood in the rain waiting for the bus, his clothes were wet. Choose and stack the absolute phrases that correctly complete the sentence. She stood at the door, looking outside, the music playing, the sun rising, the children shouting, the food cooking, the keys in her hand, her bag on her shoulder. Pause the video. The next slide contains the answer. Check your answer. She stood at the door, looking outside, the keys in her hand, her bag on her shoulder. Here is the answer to the extender. She stood at the door. She was looking outside. Her keys were in her hand and her bag was on her shoulder. The train moving fast, the lights flashing. She slowly opened the present. Her hands shaking, her eyes wide. She slowly opened the present. The people talking, the cars passing by. She slowly opened the present. Pause the video. The next slide contains the answer. Check your answer. Her hands shaking, her eyes wide. She slowly opened the present. Here is the answer to the extender. Her hands were shaking and her eyes were wide. She slowly opened the present. Thank you for watching this video. Watch it as many times as you need to master the intended learning outcomes. I hope that the content helped you to learn more about absolute phrases. Please like and subscribe for more lessons. There is a lot to learn, so don't give up. Keep believing in yourself and you will learn. See you next time. Bye.